Another impact of colonial economy on the continent of Africa was the emphasis that was placed on cash crops instead of food crops, and that brings about famine. Of course, famine means acute form of hunger. Acute form of hunger. There was also, demographic and social disruption as well as environmental damages. You will agree with me that colonial economy came with mining, and we are in a place where there is mining. Once you do mining, you are damaging the environment. You are bringing a whole lot of problems to the environment. Colonial governments were never interested, they never care. They don't want to know the implication of what they are doing. Their own is to do things that will take money from the communities that they will take home. So they are not interested in the health of the environment. And like I said, it disrupted the social fabrics or the social system. What I mean by social disruption is that stratifications changed. When I say change in stratification, I mean change in social, ladder, the structure. Some people became wealthy, while some became poor. Those people that serve as middlemen for the whites during this period made a lot of money, while those who have no business interacting with the white people continue to be poor. And apart from that, this one can be a positive impact. That's production of new crops. There were some crops that were not known to any part of Africa. So those crops, or some variant of crops that can do well on African soil, were, imported, taken into Africa, and those things were planted. It also helped the economic activities. Like today, I can tell you that there are so many types of cassava stems. Some of those cassava stems were not even known to Africa, any part of Africa. Those things were taken into Nigeria during the period of colonialism, when the colonial masters were trying to, build the kind of economic structure that will suit their own interest. That will, it was during this period that cocoa was introduced to West Africa. Railway system were built in India, in Kenya. Sorry, India is in Asia. Of course, colonialism happened in India too. But our focus is Africa. Anyway, there was export. The whole essence of the building of railway system was to make sure that it becomes easier. It becomes, much more easier for the people, for the white men, for the Europeans to export the raw materials down to their home countries, and to also make it easier again for them to bring back the finished products back home. So these are the core impacts of colonialism on the economy of Africa. The summary of the whole thing is that the economy is export oriented. They were doing productions for the purpose of exportation. The emphasis was on primary commodities with, values that will be interested in Europe. For example, sugar dominated some places, cocoa became central in Gold Coast, and even in Nigeria. Of course, they also did massive production of palm oil in Nigeria. Cotton was heavily invested in Uganda. Coffee was heavily, produced in Kenya. Tobacco was done in southern part of Rhodesia, and copper was done in Zimbabwe. In Sri Lanka, they did tea in other parts of that country. Rubber was planted in Malaysia, in other and other places, so to say, these things added significant values to, Europeans much more than in those countries they colonized, much more than in those countries where these things were actually, produced. Thank you very much.